is my favorite number. So.
Is it? How did you come up with that?
A book that I read back in the 1970s that 23 was this number around all these coincidences and things that happen. And I just loved the number. I thought, wow, that's such a cool number. And
That's
you know,
not the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, is it?
no, that's 42, I think.
Yeah, okay. I gotcha. Alrighty, so I'm gonna come over here. I'm gonna just update the website, which is where exactly? Not here. Okay, here we go. Oh, so 23. All right. I shall hold 23 in high esteem from now on.
23 skidoo, man.
Yeah. Okay. So that's good. That's all published. That's good to go. Let me just close this off so we have full bandwidth. All right, everybody. Greetings, greetings. Welcome back. NDs for Truth, Season 2, Episode 3. I'm here with Dr. Rick Kirschner, a celebrity naturopathic doctor. We don't have too many of those, but definitely this gentleman qualifies for that. And I'm going to go through some of the points that I want to make, and then I do invite everybody to read Dr. Rick's bio that I have included here. So Dr. Rick graduated in 1981 from the National College of Natural Medicine, which is now called NUNM. Is that correct?
And back then it was called the National College of Naturopathic Medicine.
Oh, yeah? Oh, I have here National College of Natural Medicine.
Because I updated the bio when they changed the name of the school back in the day.
I see.
But the school's name, at the time there was only one school, and it was my school, and it was NCNM, National College of Naturopathic Medicine. I went there to learn how to become a naturopath. No other interest at all. That was the whole driving force for everybody in that school at that time. And it was the greenhouse for the profession. Everything that happened came out of that place. Bastyr came out of that place. Southwest came out of that place. Everybody went to National that created all of these institutions, all of this stuff.
That is so cool. And how many people were in your graduating class?
Well, as I recall, we started off pretty strong and we wound up with, I think, 26, but I think we started off around 40 something.
Is that right? Oh, I would have imagined even less, but there is a certain attrition rate, you know, as the years go by.
Things happen. People need to go get a job. I remember one of my classmates dropped out for 1 year to go manage a hot sauce business on the East Coast, and then he came up a year after. But yeah, the attrition rate was pretty high, and I think in part it was we didn't have student loans, so everybody had to pull their own weight. That's a lot when you're doing 25, 26 semester credits per semester. And I also think that, you know, the politics of our profession has always been pretty muddy. There's always been problems in the politics. And I think some of that political stuff there were, I know you want to start your show and I don't want to get off on a roll.
This is the show. This is the show. Okay. Go ahead. I do want to also introduce some of the wonderful things that you've offered the world and the profession, but I could do that piecemeally. So please finish your thought. That's great.
So, you know, the politics were always a bit cumbersome because we were on the margins of healthcare. And with the time I went to school, nobody knew who we were. You know, I wound up traveling the country and the world and talking about our profession, and most people had never heard of it. So at that time, back in the 1981 to 84 was when I began to discover that I had a ability to speak in front of people and started using that. People had not heard of our profession, and the people in the school weren't sure what they'd signed up for at some point, because all the craziness. I don't know if you know, I went to school 2 years in Kansas and then 2 years in Portland because the school couldn't house its entire self in one building at that time.
Oh.
I had to move in order to stay in school from Wichita, Kansas to Portland, Oregon. So we did our basic sciences in Kansas and then did our clinical studies in Portland, Oregon. So there was all of that kind of stuff going on. I remember when I was in my second year in Kansas, Rick Brinkman, who became my co-author and business partner for about 26 years, was 1 year ahead of me in school. And so he's now in Portland. I'm in Kansas. He's writing me letters from Portland all the time. And there were words about political craziness going on. And a lot of my classmates weren't sure if they were going to stay in school because it wasn't certain whether the school was going to keep going.
Right.
So I flew to Portland during my second year in Kansas on a fact-finding mission to see if it was a real thing that we were going through. Is this for real? Are we going to make it to the end? And I got to Portland and I went into the school at the time was in the old postal building downtown on the third floor. And there was a greasy spoon at the front entrance of the building.
Nice.
It was like all you can eat breakfast for $1.20 or whatever it was.
Oh, that's so sad. I mean, it's so great that that's what it used to be, right?
That's all it was. And then there was a pawn shop on the other side of the door to the building. So a greasy spoon and pawn shop, you get up to the third floor, there's the school. And it was nothing to look at, but it did have classrooms. There were a lot of people milling around. There was a reception area and a clinical area. What sold me on the fact that this was a real thing that was worth doing was I'm walking down the hall on the third floor and I run into Dr. Bruce Canvasser. And Bruce went on with Kenny Rifkin and Jerry, gosh, these names are slipping away from me. Corey Resnick, Jerry Schlesser, and Bruce, they founded a company called Naturopathic Formulations some years later. It was a very successful supplement company just to serve our little profession. And anyway, I ran into Bruce in the hallway and he asked me some questions and I knew the answers. And then he said, all right, come on, I'm going to show you my office. We got in a car, we drove out to his office somewhere in Portland. It was a nice office. There were people sitting around the reception area waiting for their appointments. There was a person behind a desk. It had all the appearance of a doctor's office. And then he took me to his home and he had a car, he had a TV, he had a wife and a kid. I'm like, okay, it's real. It's a real profession. So I went and told everybody it's real. We're going to
go back to Canvas. Yeah. To Kansas. So your recon mission was a success, I would say.
Yes.
Well, that's amazing. I do love to hear like from doctors that came from the earlier days of the profession. So let's get into that a little bit more in a moment. Okay. I had Andre Sain on here, and I think he was around that time as well that he graduated, right? I
think Andre graduated a year after me, and I remember meeting him in the school in Portland. So that would be 1980 was when
That's cool. That is cool. All right. So let me just share with the folks that so you were also a best-selling author of numerous books and multimedia programs, including the international bestseller, now in a third revised edition, over 2 million sold. That's amazing. Dealing with people you can't stand.
We're negotiating right now with McGraw-Hill to do a fourth edition.
Is that right? Wow, that's good for you. How to bring out the best in people at their worst. We could all use a little bit of that. Yep. And as well as Love Thy Customer, Life by Design, and the comprehensive communication program, Insider's Guide to the Art of Persuasion. In 2011, his book, How to Click with People, The Secret to Better Relationships in Business and in Life, was published by Hyperion Books. So in 2015, this is all like wonderful accolades. This next point, I really am fond, if I may, am proud of you about. I don't know if I'm in the position to be proud towards you, but that's what I feel.
I can read.
Yeah, why not, huh? 2015, he produced and directed his documentary film, How Healthcare Became Sick Care, The True History of Medicine, which can be viewed for free on his website, talknatural.com. You also spent a year or so being the acting president, is that the right, of the MI?
The past president for the Naturopathic Medicine Institute.
Yeah, you were like the, what do you call it? The regent, you were okay. So Dr. Kirschner has delivered his expertise in thousands of radio and television appearances, interviews, newspaper and magazine articles, from CNBC and CBC to Fox, the Wall Street Journal to the USA Today. welcome. Thank you for being here and chatting with us. This is really cool. I'm doubting that you would be invited on CNBC today. What do you think? Would there be a chance for that?
Well, number one, I'm retired, so I don't
Oh,
care. Number I'm
okay.
not doing any marketing of anything anymore. But if number two, if the topic was business and conflict in business and things like that, yeah, I don't think they'd have a problem with it. Since I was deplatformed from LinkedIn, it'd be pretty hard for them to see what I really think.
Right.
That,
Do we want to hear about why you were deplatformed from LinkedIn? I'm curious.
I was such a bad boy. I was posting actual science that countered the narrative about the bug.
Oh yeah. That's a major sin that all naturopaths should be ashamed of.
Oh my goodness! And so I was in such good company when I got deplatformed because they knocked out Nobel Prize winning scientists, really high level doctors. They took us all out because we were countering the narrative, and that was not allowed.
Right.
So, the land of the free and the home of the brave, our First Amendment rights were suspended by private industry, and everybody said it was okay because, well, they get to set the rules. It's their company. Little did we know that the government was working with big tech to silence people like me. I just recently came across a website that listed all the people that got deplatformed, and I was on the list, and I felt really honored.
I would be highly honored. It's like the some of the great doctors, the medical doctors that have been anti-vax, and they're on like the America's most wanted, or not wanted in that way, but the least popular. They went from very popular to least popular. I spoke with Christiane Northrup on here, and she's a shining star, that woman, and she went from highly popular on Oprah to like being considered highly suspect character, right? It's such a sham. So, well, congratulations. I think that you could put that on your CV, but I know you are retired. So, but if you ever go, yeah. I'm sorry, say that again.
It is one of my favorite memories that I was so effective. I used to have this saying that if you're effective, they only kill you if you're effective.
Uh-huh.
And so that was them killing me. They just knocked me off because what I was doing was working. And the way they found me was that there were so many people wanting to connect with me. I was getting 100 to 500 connection requests on LinkedIn every week to every month. I mean, people were reading my posts and wanted to hear what I was posting. And so their algorithms sent up a flag and said, whatever he's doing, you should check it out. So I'm pretty sure that's why they took me out the way they did. And I had created 2 LinkedIn accounts when I first got on the platform. When they first launched it, I created, because I was in business and I was trying to build my business. So I created LinkedIn accounts, and I was always like, oh man, which one do I use? And finally I picked one and let the other just kind of sit. So when they deplatformed me, I activated the one that I'd let sit. And in 3 weeks' time, I was almost back to where I was, connection requests pouring in. Man, 3 weeks, and that's all it took for them to find me the second time. So.
Oh, is that right? They got you again, second time?
I got deplatformed twice by LinkedIn.
Oh my gosh. Well, then that's a double honor. You get a double medal of honor. Yeah, I mean, this whole thing about the justification of the suspension of our rights and illegal activity in the name of science. It's also justified by the fact that, well, it's good for people, it's helping people. But when do you draw the line? Like when we now look at the facts, when we look at the last 3, I guess it's about 3 years now, especially the last 2 years since they launched the experimental shots. It hasn't been effective. There's been a lot of difficulties, I will say, from it. And so when do people realize, hey, these organizations that we've looked to and that we allowed to guide us through this pandemic, this crisis, maybe they're not so credible after all? When do we switch into that?
Well, I had made that switch when I made the movie. When I looked into the history of medicine And, my question was, how did we wind up on the margins of healthcare? How did our profession, which had so much to offer, was all about restoring health, how did we wind up on the margins of healthcare in a system that thrives off of disease, death, and dysfunction, dominates the world? How did that happen? And I had bits and pieces of the story, but I wanted to be able to tell that story, to know that story, and to share that story with others so they could share it and tell it as well. And part of that is, the question is, how is it possible that after thousands of years of persecution, the Jewish community is still around? How did they survive all of that? And the answer is they know their story. So when you have a story, it binds you together as a group, as a culture. And I thought the naturopaths should know their story. They should know where they come from, why they exist, what they were intended to do, and what happened to put them on the margins. So I started a research project, and the deeper I dug, and I did 1,000 hours of research, the scarier it got for me. I was like, holy smokes, these guys didn't earn their place at the top of this thing. They bought it and crushed their opposition with lies. And then you look at the profitability factor and the corruption in the regulatory system, and on and on and on, all of which is now, I think, very easy to see for anybody willing to look. But back when I was looking into it, it was all hiding in plain sight, but it wasn't easy to find.
And it was very conspiracy theory then.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. How dare you?
Even now, conspiracy theory is a relative term. It depends on how much research you've done and how much you think for yourself. But I watched that film. It was tremendous. I remember seeing it at the Naturopathic Medicine Institute when you aired it. It was just really excellent research. And I mean, you really do turn over some rocks and reveal some shady characters that were dwelling under the rocks of this history. One of the things that I really got from it is the idea that if you tell a lie, like the Goebbels Nazi, I think said this, if you tell a lie often enough, people will believe it. Especially the more extreme and absurd it is, people might gobble it up even more. So just by repetitive language and media messages, that quackery, they made up these terms, unscientific. They made up these terms that you illustrate in your movie, and people have actually come to believe it without really looking at the facts, without asking, is this medical profession, the conventional medical profession, are they effective at dealing with chronic illness, cancer, AIDS, even things like depression in a real fashion? I could go on and on. So that was really, really, it really helped me see something in that. And,
I got to say this about conspiracy theorists. I think there's two new definitions for conspiracy theorists. The first one is profit, because, and I don't mean any profit, I mean seeing the future profit, because a lot of the things that we were saying were going to happen when we were reading the science 2 years ago have now happened. They're out in the open. Anybody that's willing to see the truth can see the truth. So, you could say we were prophetic in what we were talking was going to happen. I hope I'm not prophetic about what I think's coming next, but I'm just saying. And then the second definition is good at pattern recognition.
Right. Yeah, that's good. Trends, right? Themes. Yeah. I mean, if you practice homeopathy, you develop that skill, right? I love that definition. From the movie, I was watching the movie The Big Short, and that depicts the crash of 2000 and what was it, 13 or something, or
2007, 2008.
Oh yeah, that's earlier than that. Thank you. So it's the quote is as follows: people want an authority to tell them how to value things, but they choose this authority not based on facts or results. They choose it because it seems authoritative and familiar.
Well, so when I was doing something that's been true for me until I retired was I love doing research. I love trying to learn new things, find out new information. I still love it, but I'm no longer trying to do anything with what I learned. But back in the, other than run my little private Telegram group, but back in the day, I decided one day I really wanted to understand persuasion. I wanted to know more about it. I'd written about conflict resolution, and what we figured out was very effective. We heard from lots and lots of people. The book sold, 2 million copies. But I was curious about persuasion, which to me seemed like a higher level of order than conflict resolution. Like persuasion, instead of me managing my problem with you, what if I could bring you over to my side? I thought that was an interesting thing to learn about. So I started researching persuasion. And one of the things that I learned was that we are genetically programmed to respond to certain kinds of signals. And it's why we're able to have a civilization. So, for example, reciprocity. We respond to the signal of reciprocity. I scratch your back, you scratch mine. And why is that? Because when somebody does something for you, it invokes a sense of obligation, and you genetically want to eliminate that feeling of owing. So you want to do something back.
So it's not so altruistic then.
Whatever you call it, it turns out it's self-serving, and you do it. And yet reciprocity is what makes civilization possible. Another one of these signals is authority. So, for example, if a fire breaks out in a building, most human beings are going to look for somebody in a uniform to lead them out of that building. If there's a guy in a uniform and a guy in a clown hat, you're going to go for the guy in the uniform and follow him out of the building. So this we are genetically programmed to pay attention for signals of authority, of reciprocity, of conformity. All of this stuff makes it possible for us to have a society so we can protect ourselves from the bad and the evil. But the problem is that the bad and the evil learned about all of these signals that we're programmed to do for the sake of our civilization. And they have now risen to the highest levels of all kinds of systems where they use this as leverage against us. They actually leverage our good intentions, our idealism against us for their own gain. So the authority signal is one of those signals where I know when I was raising my daughter, and at some point I turned my business over to my daughter when I retired 6 years ago. And she was like, "But Dad, I'm not a doctor. I haven't written any books. I don't have your authority." I said, "Then borrow mine. Say about our founder, call me our founder." Just like that, you raise your authority figure, right? Just like that. And I used to tell doctors, I used to teach at Southwest for about 7 years for the incoming class. Jim Sensenig had everybody for 4 hours in the morning. I had everybody for 4 hours in the afternoon, and we had them for 5 days in a row.
That's a good.
It was awesome.
Roster there. That's a good roster.
It was so good that it ruined, I think, the education for a lot of people because we did a great job, and then they had to go through the normal education, which was not, I don't think, all that enjoyable. But I used to tell my students that, I'd say, "How many of you don't plan to wear a white coat when you're in practice?" And half the class would say, "Yeah, I don't want to do that." And I'm like, you know what the value of that white coat is? It's a signal of authority. It tells people you're the expert. Put the authority on, because that gives people confidence and they can relax because they're like, I'm in good hands. So those are signals of authority. We respond to them when somebody tells you their background. When you read my bio, anybody watching your show is going to hear that bio and go, "Oh, well, I guess maybe he's somebody with something to say." Whereas if I'm just some guy talking, they got to be highly interested to tune in. But if it's somebody, they go, "Oh, that guy's a superstar," or whatever. "Oh, I should check this out. He may be. I should take a look at that," kind of thing.
Not just frickin' frack shooting the breeze, right? Like, well, maybe to this day and age, there's a market for that. Hey, there are these two guys just talking on a park bench.
We now have people who've been highly successful who didn't have a lot of ground to stand on. You look at Joe Rogan, for example, who's got, I guess, millions of people follow him, check out his podcast. He's not a doctor. He's not a best-selling author. I think he had maybe some part of an acting career that wasn't particular.
He was a wrestler, wasn't he? Of some kind
of. But it's nothing that gave him authority, and yet he's huge. So there is a market for people that are running counter to whatever the dominant system is. And in
Right.
fact, back when I had to market my business, when I was in the promotion business for my business, they used to say, hey, find something controversial and talk about that, and you'll draw attention to yourself. And that was a model for people that went on the radio or went on TV, and they'd say something that really pricked people's interest as a way of building their own reputation. Having said that, I did not pay attention to the bug narrative, to the pandemic narrative, to create conflict or find a counter narrative. I was just trying to understand what the truth was, because a lot of people trusted me. I've lost a lot of those people, but a lot of people trusted me. I built a stellar reputation amongst my peers and colleagues. So I felt like I had a moral duty to understand what the truth was. So when people asked me, I could speak authentically. And that's the reason why I paid attention the way that I did. And I did pay attention. I tracked this from the get-go as closely as I could. I listened to everything, read everything, looked at the science from soup to nuts. I wanted to know what's going on here. And when I couldn't figure it out on my own, I reached out and talked to smart people in science and in medicine and asked them to help me understand things that I couldn't figure out on my own. So I felt like I did my due diligence in making my movie and writing my book, and I did my due diligence in understanding what happened to our society, and really tried to be an authoritative, a legitimate authoritative source for anybody that came to me.
Well, good for you. Good for you. I mean, at the very least, like what we studied and what we knew, what we took for granted to be acceptable science was just being discarded and replaced with new definitions, like total Orwellian newspeak, changing definitions to serve the party purpose, right? Like I had learned about herd immunity being a certain percentage of the population being exposed to a pathogen virus, and then there's herd immunity, and then the virus just dies off, and very few are killed. Very few. It's a very low risk to the big picture. But then the World Health Organization replaced that definition by the number of people that have been vaccinated.
Yeah.
How do you like them apples? And I was like, wait a sec, like, why isn't everybody blowing up about just that one example? But there was, and there is, you're bringing up a very important point here, which, by the way, is part of our mind-body medicine talk, because the mind is a very interesting field of tremendous power. So this aspect is, it's related to the political weird things that happened in the last couple of years around the pandemic, but still, we're talking about this art of persuasion, or the aspect of persuasion, subliminal messaging, control, mass psychosis. I think that the technology that they have today, I really like how you set that up, that, this is what sort of drives people, these different aspects like conformity and reciprocity, what you were talking about before. But then, yes, those who would control, who like control for whatever reason they enjoy, are using that against us. Well, their technology is incredible. I have this video on my on Indies for Truth here. It's one of the article's videos, and it shows how in the 60s there was programming that when the TV would they only had programming till midnight, not today where you could stay up all night watching TV, watching God knows what. But at midnight, the TV would shut off and they would play the national anthem of the United States. And yeah, okay, you remember that. Well, there's very primitive subliminal messaging in that, so that if you play it very slow, you could see that as they would take out the lyrics of one line, they would flash these symbols, these messages. And it's very clear in the messaging that they started this subliminal messaging. And a lot of the messaging was consume, trust the government. That's basically what it is. Consume, trust the government. It's a subtle like deification of the government, like which is, whatever. But imagine today with the technology that they have, how that subliminal messaging must be. Because you've seen probably people that you love dearly that were intelligent, bright, educated people be taken into the mass psychosis and basically become irrational. You probably saw that.
I definitely saw a lot of that. Not only in my life, but through my friends. I've heard so many stories of families that have stopped talking to each other, of lifetime friends and colleagues that cut each other off and refused to talk anymore. Or if they did talk, it was just yelling what they should think and what they should believe. I heard a wonderful metaphor the other day, and it really stuck with me, that there's three kinds of people. And I'm not going to tell the joke that there's three kinds of people: those who are good at math and those who are not.
but you did, and I'm glad you did. That's a good one.
Kinds of people are sheep, wolves, and sheepdogs. And I know where I stand. Woof! I'm a sheepdog. And what's a sheepdog do? It protects the sheep from the wolves. That's why people like me and you felt compelled to tell the truth, to speak up when everybody said shut up. That's what was driving. We're sheepdogs. We're trying to help humanity. We're not wanting to see harm done. We're trying to honor our oath.
Yeah.
But the people on the other side of this, those intelligent people that got caught up in this, that rolled up in this, I see how they got played. I see how it was done to them. And so, for example, there's one of these signals that's genetically encoded for all of us is the consistency principle. And it's basically the longest journey begins with a single step. The hardest part of launching a rocket is getting it out of the atmosphere. It can then go around and around and around hundreds of times, but getting it out of the atmosphere, that's the hard part. That first step is the hard part. Watch that first step. It's a doozy. But if you can get somebody to take one step in a certain direction, they're more likely to take the next step. And if they take two steps in a direction, the third step is way easier. And the fourth step is a no-brainer. And then the fifth step is automatic. So when this thing started with 2 weeks to flatten the curve, every decent human being that heard that call was like, I'll do my part. I'll take that step. I can stay indoors for 2 weeks so the hospitals aren't overrun. Yeah. And that's how they did it. They did it one step at a time, incrementally, because that's the consistency principle. So it's not the only principle, but it was one of the ones they used to entrain people. So by the time they got to that step of, put on the face diaper, or go get the jab, or, well, you need another jab, or, well, now you need a booster, or now you need two more by the time they got there, for those people that took that ride, that consistency principle meant that was automatic for them. Yeah. And the hard part for them was people who weren't doing it too, because they're like, what is wrong with those people? Why aren't they going the rest of the ride? Yes. It was very hard for them. But then the people running the show provided them with all the answers, all the talking points, everything they needed to know in order to keep out new information, to keep out curiosity, to keep out a willingness to know the truth. And it was like, we'll tell you what the truth is. You don't have to worry. We've got our top people on this. Here's what you need to know. So even when they send conflicting messages, like Fauci saying nobody needs to wear a mask, maybe it makes people feel more confident, and then within a month he's like everybody should wear a mask, and then within 3 months 2 masks, you should wear 2 first put the thing and then put one over. That was the same guy giving a mixed message through time. Well, one of the things that I learned when I studied communication is that when you give people a mixed message and you do it with authority and you're congruent, you create a state of mental suspended animation. Right. At which point people are susceptible to talking points. You create confusion, put in a talking point, your brain grabs that talking point to get out of the state of confusion. Right. So I watched how they did this. I know how they did it. I watched the way it got played. And that's why whenever people ask me, how do I deal with these folks that have cut me off? How do I deal with these people that are so afraid now, the people that wore the masks the whole time and then got all the shots and the boosters and they're still getting COVID and they still can't see what's happened to them. How do I deal with that? And I say, first and foremost, the bridge that we need to keep building is the humanity bridge. And humanity, as I define it, is the part where we care about each other and we're in service to each other. So to build that bridge, you need kindness, forgiveness, compassion. Those things allow us to maintain our humanity in our dealings with people who are caught up in the mass psychosis. Yeah. There will come a moment of reckoning where even the people deep inside of this thing, hopefully not too late, but I don't want to get too far down that rabbit hole, but they will have a moment of reckoning and they will suddenly look at their own behavior and reflect on it and go, oh man, I don't know what happened to me. That wasn't.
You see that with some videos that are circulating, like for instance, people saying that all you folks that didn't take the vaccine, you're the heroes. There have been a few of those that have been circulating, on the grassroots network. So I absolutely agree with you. And I think that it's beautiful. We have to keep that kindness and forgiveness and compassion to be ready to help those who have been, have fallen prey to the mass psychosis. And, there's an ex-KGB guy. I don't know if you ever saw his writings about how the regime, like the Stalinist regime, had implemented it. It's very similar to what they did in Maoist China and different totalitarian regimes. It's like the dictator's handbook. These different things that you're talking about with consistency and causing a confusion of ideals and like things that you've taken for granted are turned upside down in their head, and people don't know what to hold on to, and then you give them what you want them to hold on to as the solution. He said, if he called it demoralized. If somebody is demoralized, it's incredibly hard to bring them back to being, autonomous, self-sufficient, able to think for themselves, self-esteem, standing on their own 2 feet. It's very hard. So I could see in our medicine, if we see this as a humanity problem, we're going to have to be acquainted with how to help people if and when the time comes when they're seeking help, totally disoriented, depressed, whatever it is, how they come out of that.
It's going to be hard for people when they do have their moment of reckoning, but I do believe it'll come. Because when the pain reaches a certain level, when the complexity reaches a certain level, the talking points quit working. That's just they're not that clever, these people that ran this show. They're clever and they paid high-end people a lot of money to come up with what to say, what to think, all that kind of stuff. I go back in time for a moment because you had mentioned a little while ago the word anti-vaxxer. So I was a part of the medical freedom movement early on, long before all this COVID stuff. And what got me involved was I knew people who had damaged kids from the immunization schedule. And so I started looking into it. And when I looked into it, I found that there were a lot of problems and that the problems were never addressed. Nobody was willing to address these problems. And I felt like I had a moral obligation to stand with those families and demand accountability and say, we can do better than this. So I remember when the word anti-vaxxer first got used, it was during the so-called measles thing, the measles epidemic that happened in New York City.
Right.
The entire global press began this frame of reference for people that weren't going along as anti-vaxxers. But anti-vaxxers is actually a term used to dismiss, diminish, and marginalize the parents of vaccine-injured children, so that no accountability. That was the whole point of that term. And yet it's been installed for people. So if you were to ask me, are you an anti-vaxxer? I would be like, no, I'm not. But I am a decent human being. I see there are problems and I want these problems addressed.
Good point. Very good point.
I want to say something else, about these signals. So, if you think about the survival value of consistency or conformity. So we all know that not only do birds of a feather flock together, the reason they flock together is for the safety of the flock. you're better in a crowd. If there's somebody with a gun, your odds of getting shot are smaller, or stabbed by a knife are smaller if there's a lot of people around you.
Yeah.
So this is why we created cities. This is why we created civilization, so we could all come together to protect ourselves from the wolves that wanted to prey on us. And that meant you got to conform. You got to be a part of this rather than apart from it.
Mm-hmm.
Every once in a while, somebody comes along, they're rebellious, they don't want to be a part of it. But for the most part, people conform. So there's safety in numbers, unless somebody is manipulating that conformity for bad ends. And then it's a very unsafe environment, which is why I always tell people, you don't follow the crowd, you follow your intelligence.
Yeah.
My mom used to say when I was a kid, she used to say, just because everybody's running over a cliff like a lemming doesn't mean you have to follow them.
Way to go, Mom.
There's
good, simple advice, right?
And I have an experience in my personal history that made that point for me, that made it real for me. It involved my father, who had a dear friend, his best friend at one point. They learned to fly planes together. They played golf together. They started a business together. Our family knew their family. Our family knew our family. We were all like of a group, it was that kind of thing. And one night, that guy was having dinner at the Beverly Hills nightclub in Northern Kentucky. It's a dinner club with his wife. And there were a few hundred people in the banquet hall. And smoke started to fill the banquet hall. And the entire crowd rushed towards two doors, both of which were locked. And so I don't remember the exact number of people, but my dad's friend and his wife died that night from smoke inhalation because they couldn't get out of the building. But the sad thing is there were 3 unlocked doors. But everybody rushed followed the crowd so for me, right. I don't follow the crowd. I follow my intelligence. I follow, I pay attention and I try to think what's the right choice here, because I know that being in a crowd can be deadly because of that experience that involved my dad's dear friend.
That's terrible. It does show you that you have to think for yourself. I think it's a beautiful balance to think for yourself and to be open to criticism, to be open to learn. It's a very beautiful balance, because we could get too caught up in what I think and I know and all that stuff too. But that's primary. There was this psychology experiment done, which I really like a lot, where they had 9 actors in a room. It was like a classroom. They had one person who was basically the test subject. And a teacher would go put an example on the board, and the answer was obvious. It was like 2 + 3, equals A, 2, B, 5, whatever. The answer was 5. But if all 9 actors chose the wrong answer, the test subject would choose the wrong answer 70% of the time, even though they knew it was wrong.
Conform.
Now, if one person out of the 9 actors, one person chose the right answer, 100% of the test subjects chose correctly. There's this percentage of 10%. So if 10% of the people stand up and are true, it inspires others to follow that. Let's say the sheep, so that you need 10% sheepdogs, I guess. And then the 90%, the rest of the people who conform will be inspired to follow what is true. It's a very interesting piece of psychology.
Well, it is. And, I always think big social change happens on a bell curve. And the front end of that bell curve, that's where your 10% are, or your 20%. Those are the early adopters. Those are the people that see through it. Those are the people that see a better way. And what happens is there are people watching those people. And no matter what they say, they're watching with curiosity. They're like, oh, are they going to die? Are they going to get killed? Are they make a terrible mistake? But they're watching. They are watching.
Good.
That's where the bell curve, they realize, hey, they're still standing. I'm going to join them. And that bell curve starts to climb. Now there's a group of people watching that group of people. Are they going to survive? Are they going to? And pretty soon you have the majority. If it's a right change, if it's a necessary change, little by little, everybody joins in except for us, the tail end of that bell curve, which represents the dinosaurs who never change, never get it, they die off. That's it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we can't see each other anymore because the media system, the government system has blinded us to one another. They have
And censorship. You got censored. You got censored off your platform. I'm censored on Facebook. I can't post any. Nobody sees what I post anymore.
That's right. And that's by design, because if we can't hear each other or see each other, we can't watch each other to see if you're still alive.
That 10% thing, the influence, they want to remove that influence thing. And I can feel that. I feel that in the interactions of what's going on. There are these little corridors that they let us walk up and down, but they're the ones that they don't, that's deliberate too.
Well, it's, that's, you go back through philosophy all the way back through the Middle Ages. It's well known that if you take away a person's voice, you damage society, that it's important that we be able to see each other and hear each other so we can see and hear what's going on. So silencing people through social media was a brilliant move. And justifying it at the front end was a single step. So when they took out Alex Jones, I told my wife when they first knocked Alex Jones off the internet because he says such horrible things about crisis, whatever it was, I told my wife, I said, this is the beginning of the move to censor all of us.
That's right. Absolutely.
We all say, yeah, they should take him away. His words are bad. We should stop him from talking. Well, the next step is to stop somebody else from talking. Then if stop a few people from that. Now it's anybody that talks about something, we must stop them. So that was to keep that bell curve of change from happening, from people waking up to what was going on and being imposed on them. And it was very, and that's why this has taken so damn long, and it's still going on.
It's still going on. The battle still rages. It's World War III of the mind.
It is.
I do have a very interesting piece of positive knowledge. I call it knowledge, but I have to say, I'm not 100% sure if it's true. I think it's true. So there's something called Project Looking Glass. Have you heard about this? It was basically it was this black ops program, as far as I understand, whereby the shadow government was using it as it's a very highly developed artificial intelligence, and they could plug in their action. Let's say you and I wanted to see what our action would have. So let's say you announced that you were going to run for governor of Oregon. You could see, plug it into the artificial intelligence, and it would tell you what the outcome would likely be and what percentage. So they've been using this, the government have been using this to plan all of these moves. So if we make this move in the media, what will the public respond with? And it ended up being very, very interestingly accurate, because they have the artificial intelligence from massive amounts of data that they can parse that and come to predict the pulse of humanity. Well, after the great, the end of the great Mayan year in December 21st, 2012, they couldn't get past this point. No matter what they chose, it was always ending up in the same outcome. So no matter what they chose to do to try to avoid the outcome, it ended up in the same outcome. So they hired this guy to come in who had been involved in the beginning, who designed this artificial intelligence. And he said, sorry, this is like a singularity. I don't know what it means, but doesn't matter. This is beyond your control now. And basically what he said is that it's like the control faction on this planet is going to lose, because this event is like a great awakening where people wake up to a certain degree. Maybe we all wake up Buddha, Christ, Krishna level. I don't know. Maybe it's that, or maybe it's just that we wake up and realize that we've been duped. Whatever the case is, there's a singularity point in the future that they couldn't avoid. And the whistleblower that revealed this, the guy who programmed it, was saying that they're just bad losers. They know they're going to lose, but they're trying to do whatever shit they can to pull as much down as they can. That's what's happening. But it is just a matter of time until this ends. I like that idea. I do like that idea a lot.
Well, I don't know anything about Project Looking Glass, but I do know there have been plenty of black box projects, some of which have been called out in public by Congress back in the 1980s. I think the Frank Church Committee was able to get all this information to the public about things that had been on the hush hush. There's a wonderful free documentary online called The Minds of Men. And it's about the foundations of mind control, where this came from, who was involved, and some big names were involved early on out of their idealistic desire to benefit humanity by taming the beast in man.
Isn't it always how that starts?
Yeah, always starts with something idealistic.
The path to hell is paved with good intentions.
It got taken over by the CIA. And then but anyway, this documentary ends in the 1970s. And what's interesting to me about that is the 1970s is when it really went deep and wide. Suddenly, mind control was being studied by some terrible people who really figured out all these things about how to pull the levers and push the buttons to get us to work the way they want us to work. But the fly in the ointment, and it's always going to be this, and I used to teach this to my students, is that your only defense in a world where there are competing forces trying to control you, your only defense is your ability to think for yourself, to be a critical thinker, to ask who, what, where, when, how, and why questions, to examine what you're being told rather than accept what you're being told. If you maintain, cultivate, and develop in yourself your critical thinking skill, it can protect you from the machinations of others who may not have your best, the best outcome in mind for you.
But critical thinking is a form of white supremacy.
Well, what isn't these days?
I'm sorry, I'm being very obviously tongue-in-cheek. It has been demonized as part of the whole mass psychosis, social engineering thing to think, well, if you think for yourself and you have critical thinking, well, that's just very rational, left brain, very, mansplaining kind of stuff. Anyway, good. Thank you. That hit deep, what you said about thinking for yourself. Your only defense, I 100% agree with you. And in a way, what humanity has to evolve towards is everybody thinking for themselves and learning how to listen to others, So I think for myself, doesn't mean I don't give a shit about what you say. In fact, if I am comfortable in myself and I can think for myself, it frees me to be a better listener, right?
Well, how can you do critical thinking if you're not hearing anything? I mean, if you provide, like, for example, Project Looking Glass, never heard of it. I'm going to do it. I'm curious now. What is that? I heard you. I'm going to look into it.
Sure.
Because I'm self-determining, and I determined that sounds interesting. I'd like to know more about it. But here's the beauty of science. So, in my movie, I said that the medical industry you changed their brand to scientific medicine, even though it wasn't true. It didn't really apply to them, but they took that brand name, science, because science was the watchword of the day. Everybody was talking about the breakthroughs of science. So the medical system went, we'll call ourselves scientific medicine, and everybody else is unscientific.
Right?
So, the interesting thing to me about all of this is that we are designed to be self-determining and to make choices and experience consequences, and as a result to gather information. And if we all play our part in that, the collective knowledge and wisdom of the human race can only grow. That's the design of things, that we pay attention and we think for ourselves and we gather information. But the beauty of science and the scientific method is that it defeats another built-in mechanism of our consciousness, which is the mechanism of self-fulfilling prophecy. We're all built this way. We make an assumption, We act like it's true and we look for proof. Everybody does it. So if I assume that whatever you say is, from God's mouth to my ears passing through your brain, if I make that assumption, then I'm going to act like it's true and I'm going to look for proof and I will find it. Why will I find it? Because we live in an infinite universe where there's 7 billion choices and we're paying attention to 7 of them. So there's always something that would reinforce whatever we assume to be true if we're looking for it.
Right.
So for example, and I used to do this with my audiences, I go, and here, you play along with me. I go, if you think somebody's a jerk, how do you talk to them?
I walk away. I don't talk to them very much.
Play along with me, though. If you think
okay. Sorry.
How do you talk to them like they're a
jerk?
Thank you. And if you talk to them like they're a jerk, how do they always act whenever you're around? Like a
jerk. And
what do you say to yourself about them? They're a
bloody jerk.
Okay. So that's self-fulfilling prophecy.
Right.
So, a person whose starting assumption is that nobody likes them. And there are people that grow up believing nobody likes them. And they walk into a room of wonderful human beings, friendly, outgoing, wonderful people, but they believe nobody likes them. They're going to look around the room for the one person looking down, lock on target, go, see, nobody likes me.
Exactly.
Likewise, if a person walks in a room and thinks everybody likes me, even if nobody does, but they think everybody likes them,
right.
Farts and gets a kind of a smile on their face, they're going to lock on and go, see, everybody likes me.
He likes me, right?
So that's self-fulfilling prophecy, and we all have this mechanism built into our conscious mind. The beauty of the scientific method is that it's not about looking for proof of what you assume to be true. It's about testing your assumption. Maybe I'm wrong. Let me try to disprove it.
It's supposed to be that. And that's what it is, truly. That's what it is, truly.
It's a scientific method to test your assumptions.
Yes.
So, for example, when I would gather a piece of information about something, I wouldn't assume it was true because I'm absolutely certain I could prove to myself whatever I assume to be true is true, regardless of what the truth is. So instead, I go, let me see if I can disprove this. Mm-hmm. And if it remains standing after you try to disprove it, you go, I think I'm onto something. Absolutely. That's the scientific method, not what's being called science today. No. Science is a dogma, as a religion, as a belief system. That isn't the scientific method. That's the opposite of the scientific method. So what critical thinking is, in a sense, our scientific method to live our lives in truth, where we think about what we're hearing, not to prove to ourselves that it's right, but to fill in the gaps and make sure that it's right. See, what am I not hearing? So when I was in practice and working with patients, or when I do counseling, coaching, or mentoring with people, I want to listen, and I want to listen really well. And to me, listening isn't about hearing their set of assumptions. It's about questioning their assumptions, to go beyond those assumptions. What's behind that? What's behind that? And I used to do this with patients that had serious health problems. And just by getting behind it, their problems would go away. Serious health, cancer, a high blood pressure, tennis elbow. Let's talk to your elbow, see what it's doing for you.
That's awesome. That is the old roots of because the talk today was old and new keys of mind-body medicine. You're talking, that's mind-body medicine. That is. Assumptions, mental assumptions, constructs, self-fulfilling prophecies, redundant stories that we get locked in, the narrative and everything. That's amazing. Kudos to you. That's really great. That's really, for me, where the most powerful medicine lies. Everything else is management, So what's interesting about all of these things is that they're double-edged blades. So you can use critical thinking to slice something down and to really get behind it and see what's there. But you could also use the story that a person tells and reinforce that story. And some stories are worth reinforcing, the ones that bring us together, the ones that create cohesion in a community. We all know that history is written by the winners, right? The things we believe about history, any kind of human history, are based on whoever told the stories about human history and what they believed. So you have all kinds of scientists doing work on
early civilizations, for example, and they refuse to pay attention to things that are disruptive to the story they want to tell.
Right.
And you hear somebody that goes in there and says, well, what about this? What about that? They go, nah, and they explain it away because I have my story and I'm sticking to it. So I have a story about me that I tell me that allows me to have a great life. I don't want to screw that up. So I'm not going to test my assumptions. I'm going to run with them. I have assumptions that empower me in life. I look for proof and I get to be right about them. My mom used to say, you can learn anything you put your mind to. That's a great story. Is it true? I don't know. I don't care. I believe it.
Well, that's one reason why I think there's a powerful quote by Buddha that's a very relevant to this moment. He says, a person must gnaw themselves to the bone. Meaning you have to keep questioning everything. I think some grace needs to get in there, because if you're just gnawing yourself to the bone, it hurts. It hurts gnawing it.
Yeah. I'm not gnawing myself to the bone. I get it though. And there was a time in my life when I did gnaw myself to the bone. There was a time in my life where my story was not supportive of my life. I had a very different early part of my life to the way my life worked out. People that would meet me now who knew me then might be pretty shocked to see how my life turned out. That guy had that life. Holy smokes, that's possible. Because I had terrible stories I told myself when I was young, and they really plagued me and made everything hard for me. And I kept finding proof, because we all can find proof for whatever we assume to be true.
Right.
Fortunately, I was dealt enough adversity that my stories got challenged and tested. And little by little, the light broke through, and I realized that's not true. I'm telling myself a story that's hurting me. I can change my story and change my life. However, even though I won't test certain stories I now tell myself because I like the results that they produce for me, when it comes to the stories I tell you about you, or to our culture about our culture, or my community about my community, I want to do my best to ascertain the truth. That's part of my story to myself, is that I'm interested in the truth. So I test my assumptions. I dig deep. I try to find where the facts live, no matter where they take me. And because I do that, I know, whether somebody else knows this about me or not, I know I'm a trustworthy person. I trust me. I would never ask you to trust me. I would ask you to trust yourself to test what I say. So when I taught, and I taught for years, 30 some years I taught, I told my students every time I taught a class of any kind or gave a speech, I said, I don't want you to believe me, but I do want you to test what I say to you against your own experience.
That's exactly what we need to do. And that's a form of critical thinking, which is exactly the opposite of what this part of the mass psychosis is, to get highly offended and then expect to be able to cancel the person that offended you. Yeah. It's the exact opposite. If you say something that offends me, the critical thinking process is to take it in. Let's say you criticize me, or you say something that hits me. What's that?
Jerk.
Yeah. Okay. I'm a jerk. All right. So let me take that in. Am I a jerk? I don't think I'm a jerk. Maybe I could be a jerk sometimes, but I'm not. I am not a jerk. All right. So I'm okay. So I just did my critical thinking process, or I really thought about it. I considered it. Yeah. Like versus like teaching people, and the young people have been infected so terribly with this in our own profession. It's very pervasive. Yeah.
So one of the things that happens in conventional medical education is they take away your ability to think critically. They work very hard at getting you to follow the rules and do the cookbook. This is what we do. This is how we find out what it is. This is what we do when we find out. This is we tag it, bag it, and treat it. That's what we do.
Right.
So in the conventional system, it stole the heart, the humanity from the medical industry. It really did. It took it away. You talk to anybody who went through medical school, they will tell you that there were so many nights that they didn't get to sleep and their relationships fell apart. And a lot of them wound up using drugs just to do their rounds and the schedules that they had to keep in the conventional system. It's designed to dampen your critical thinking skills and make you a follower of what do they call that? Standard of care.
Oh, right. Which has now infiltrated our medicine. And I don't know if you saw last week, I had some lovely naturopathic doctors and some, one student that was still in process or perhaps just graduated. And we were critiquing the colleges, naturopathic colleges, and the disease that has infiltrated them. Well, this exact thing that you're saying, to dampen critical thinking. You're just so overwhelmed by all the information and you're just suppressed. And even there's a bullying kind of energy to a lot of the supervisors now and the teachers. It's all to just kind of cram you into the box of how you should think rather than thinking for yourself.
Well, so when my daughter was in college, it's a long story, make a long story short, I required my daughter to pay for her college, and if she finished it, I would pay her back. So
nice.
I had good reason for that, and it worked, and she did. But because she was paying for it herself, she had a different mindset than a lot of her classmates who had loans or somebody else doing something. She had to make the money to pay for college. And she's in a class one day, and the guy in front of the room is pouring all of his opinions about everything into the room, like that's teaching. Here's my opinion about this, my opinion about that. This is what I think, and blah, 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 blah. And my daughter raised her hand and we called on her. She stood up. She said, I'm paying for this class and I don't think I'm getting a good value for my dollar. Other students were like,
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Good for her. It takes courage, especially in this day. I know that there was a lot of pressure. I could feel it. I could feel the fear in the air to say anything against the narrative. There was truly a strong fear. And I wonder why it was so strong, because
it's still happening.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I don't feel the fear as much. Maybe I transcended it. I don't know. I just don't care anymore, but I felt it very strong. And there was perhaps that first step for me, launching my rocket off the ground was getting past this inertia of fear. What could happen? I mean, I was naive when I got hit by what could happen. I didn't realize the extent. I thought naturopathic doctors and students were a slice of like a cut above, or a slice of cut.
Yeah.
Right. I thought but no, obviously not.
They're human after all.
Yeah. I
watched you go through that, Moshe. I watched as you wrestled with your conscience and found your feet beneath you in the midst of all the pressure and all of the countervailing winds. And it was a beautiful thing to behold. And I've respected you ever since because of it. I'm not saying you're right about everything you think, but I'm saying you did your best to be honest, to be authentic, and to pay attention in an authentic way, like a good man and a good doctor. You really did that. And I respect you for that. And, but I'll tell you right now, so in Oregon, one of our doctors just wrote the most nasty letter telling people to not vote in favor of certain candidates for the board of the state association because they're hateful anti-vaxxers.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, really? You would talk about your colleagues that way? Why would you do that? Why would you want to? Why would you do that? It just blows my mind, because the fact that anybody's willing to run for anything anymore, that counts for something. The fact that somebody's willing to step up, if they have a different opinion than yours, the more diversity of opinion you have, the better the result. That's the value of a group getting together, not everybody thinking the same thoughts and agreeing to the same agreements. No, it's wrestling and testing. You get the best outcomes. I love meetings if I have people that think different than me, because it rounds out my thinking or draws me out or makes me see something in a different way.
Yeah.
But what they're doing now in the profession, it's kind of divided itself between the go along to get along folks who are willing to do anything to get the table scraps from the medical industry.
Right.
You know, "Oh, let me sit at the big kids table, please."
Right.
And the doctors that just want to serve humanity and do a good job of it, and know that they need to learn a lot of things to be good at that. There's a lot I got to learn to be responsible with you for you when you come to me for your health. So we've seen this now happen, and I got to say, it's pretty frightening. Even one of my students from Southwest went on to form an organization that not only is promoting every immunization, like they're made by Santa's elves in a workshop out of pixie dust and unicorn horns.
Yeah.
But he started a group that was part of the drive to suppress doctors that didn't think like him. And whenever I look at him, I think, man, if this was Germany, he'd be one of the Nazis. Yeah. That's the way the Nazis operated: suppress, suppress, suppress. I'm like, our medicine isn't about suppression. How do you as a naturopath want to suppress people finding their truth and speaking honestly? How do you get there?
Right. Even especially, if I may say, when they're right about the science. Like one of the boards of naturopathic medicine, this is something that has come to my attention recently, was voting on the fact that they would not allow it's like maybe it's not a board, but like a state organization, association, like the naturopathic physicians of this state kind of thing. They were voting that they shouldn't allow members that hadn't had the experimental shot. And then they also, I heard that they were getting their intel, and they were getting some influence from the governor of the state. So yes, and the susceptibility is exactly what you said. And this is why I published my book in 2004. It sounds like a long time ago. It was The Revolution of Naturopathic Medicine, Remaining True to Our Philosophy. Basically, I diagnosed, just being a part of the profession, that we have a weakness, a fear, that we lack confidence in ourselves. So we want to gain credibility by emulating the authoritative medicine. How's that worked out for us?
It's not what we were designed to do. And all the people that came before us certainly didn't have that in mind for us. We were meant to provide a competitive paradigm to a suffering humanity, a paradigm of health and healing instead of sickness and death. That was our purpose, that was our place, and that's our role even to this day. And I think I know where that kind of thing that you just described comes from, because you now have people graduating from our schools that don't know how to be doctors. They come out so confused. Yeah. They don't know how to be good doctors. So what do? The same thing people in the public sector do when they come out of college. They get a job working for government. They become bureaucrats. They become controllers, because I can't do it myself, but I'll control others. Right. So you have a bunch of know-nothing people on a lot of these state boards now in our profession who don't know how to practice, don't know how to be good doctors, couldn't make a living if it depended on that. And instead they run for office and become controllers of others. So that's not healthy for our profession. What we really ought to be doing is gaining the benefit of experience. We ought to be listening to, I'm going to call myself an elder, even though I'm only 73.
I think it's fair. You graduated in 1981. I think you're
I've been around the block, and it's not my first circus. but what's the saying? Nature is a hard teacher. She gives the test first and the lesson after. Mm-hmm. So the problem is that the test and the lesson are separated by time. Cause and effect in life are separated by time. You make certain choices when you're young, and then when you get to be my age, you get to find out what that did to you. So there's a cause-effect relationship, but it's separated by time. And the only way to defeat that distance is by gaining the wisdom of people that are older and wiser than you, that have been down that road ahead of you, who can save you all of that pain if you simply turn to them and say, tell me what you've learned so that I can gain the benefit instead of going through the test, consequence.
Right. Absolutely. That is such good wisdom you're dropping. And it's a great thing that the colleges are just making every effort to maintain their relationship with their elders. That's or they fired most of them.
Get rid of
fired them.
Bring in people that aren't naturopathic to tell the naturopathic students how to be naturopaths on their way to becoming what?
Bureaucrats.
Bureaucrats. That's where most of these people are going to wind up volunteering for positions on boards so they can be controllers because they can't succeed as doctors, but they think that by being in power, they're somehow going to succeed. And it turns out, no, that's really not true. You're not going to succeed by gaining power. You succeed by offering a service that people need and desire and being able to tell people about it in a way that they can recognize that they need and desire it. So I feel like I personally feel like our schools have failed our profession. I feel like our state associations have failed our profession. And if I were to take it all the way to back when we were building all these institutions, and this is where I'm going to be really honest. And if we got MDs paying attention to what I'm saying, I don't mean to depress anybody, but this is my truth. Test me. I'm not asking you to believe me, but this is my truth. I think that nature works in cycles. So just like you have your summer, fall, winter, spring, right? I got into the profession after a long winter. Back in 1977, our profession was just beginning to sprout again from the cold earth. It had gone through a period of darkness where everything had been suppressed by the medical industry.
Flexner Report, all the way back.
All the way back. That was the beginning of the winter. But under the ground, there were seeds germinating, and there were still doctors holding the flame of it and keeping the heat on those seeds and making that happen, but not a lot of them. And by the way, those people that kept it alive in that winter, those are real heroes that we hardly know their names, but amazing people that kept this paradigm of healing and health alive when the whole world told them they were wrong and they should shut up. They kept going somehow, and maybe not always on the up and up, because you got to protect yourself and your family, but they got it done. They kept it alive. When I came along, I gained the benefit of all that work. It was springtime, and we only had one school, but we were a greenhouse for the whole profession. Suddenly seeds were flying, and then we moved into summer, and summer was when we began building. We now have enough people. Let's build associations. Let's get licensing laws. We built, and then now we move into autumn where everything is matured. It's time to get our harvest, to collect the benefit of what we did. And that's when this whole pandemic thing just came along and took the coming winter and accelerated our move towards it. So in my opinion, we have a dark winter in front of us as a profession. We've lost our soul, our identity. Our schools no longer teach our medicine. We still have a couple of pockets of greenhouse, like the Naturopathic Medicine Institute, Verna Hunt in Canada, that are doing things to keep the medicine alive. But it's got to be indoors, because
and it's through individuals. It's through the nonconformists, through the critical thinkers, think for themselves, naturopaths. And there are enough of us that could possibly keep things alive.
It's a greenhouse thing we have to do. We've got to germinate seeds. We got to keep the medicine alive to survive this winter, because this isn't over. This is really, in my opinion, this thing we've witnessed for the last 2 years is in the beginning of its curve. It's far from over. What was it? Justin Trudeau just said yesterday that unless enough people get flu shots and COVID shots, we may have to bring back some controls. So now they've snuck the flu shot in there, because
I love Justin Trudeau as being the poster boy for whatever politically the global agenda is trying to manifest, right? He's like the spokesperson for that.
So where I'm going with this is that Benedict Lust and later John Bastyr both said this, that our medicine will survive. It'll survive this generation. It'll survive us. And the reason it'll survive is that it's nature's medicine, and it's not going away. It's going to be there when we come to the next spring.
Yeah, I agree.
So we're keeping that flame alive as we go through this winter of wokeness, winter of brokenness. But if I could go back in time, and this, by the way, in the mind body work that I used to do is one of the most powerful questions. If you knew then what you know now, what would you do differently? To me, that's one of the most profound questions you can ask yourself. If I'd have known then what I know now, what would I have done differently?
I ask my patients that.
It's a great question. It's so profound because it tells you you're more resourceful than you thought, right? You go, oh, I guess I did have choices. I just didn't know I.
Right. And so you're not fixed. It's not fixed now because it wasn't then either.
Exactly. So I think that if I could go back in time, I would have championed the idea that instead of allowing every state to have its own licensing law, making all these compromises just to win a license to practice, we should have had one bill that represented our profession and worked and worked and worked to get that one bill passed in all these different domains so that our profession would have had that layer of protection around it. It would have been harder work. It would have taken more time. But instead of us being smashed like a piece of glass through all of these different regulations and rules placed on, one state you can call yourself a doctor, in another state you cannot. In one state you can order labs, in another state don't you dare order labs. In one state you can draw blood, in another state no blood drawing for you, don't even put your hands on them. So one bill for the entire country, same thing in Canada, one bill, that's where all the effort could have gone. And we would wind up a more united profession right now with our schools being able to provide a valid and valuable education instead of this fractured and fragmented place we're at this moment with a bunch of know-nothing naturopaths who think they know everything without having any experience, and a bunch of old folks like me that are stepping off the wagon, kind of like, we did our best, we gave our best,
right?
And we're still here if you want to talk with us. But it's your turn.
My gosh. Well, I don't know if that would have been effective. I think it sounds very wise. And if you could have gone back, perhaps you would have succeeded. I'm a little dubious about whether or not you could have gotten a bill pure enough in that would be recognized by the government, just because we know that those powers that have formed the conventional medical model and that naturopathic medicine is trying to emulate, in your movie, it becomes clear there are, Rockefeller type influences that are it's not in the interest to create systems that actually help heal people, but rather keep them sick. And so I think that's a beautiful idea. I'm just not sure. I'm not saying I know it wouldn't work. I'm not sure it could have worked.
We can't know.
No.
That's not what happened. But here's what I think, how I think it would have played out. I've thought about this stuff for years, what we could have done different, how it might have played out. So you're right. The control system owns the system. It's on top of everything, and it makes all these determinations up to a point. But if you keep coming back with the same thing and you're congruent and consistent through time, that creates a sense of authority for you. It really does. You just keep showing up, you gain authority, and you educate people by showing up. It's kind of like I always tell people when dealing with bad behavior, you train people on what's going to happen every time they engage in that bad behavior by having a consistent response to it. Every single time, this is my response to it, over and over and over. At some point, they're like, okay, I know. I'll give you an example. So there's a thing we call Pygmalion power. And that's where you tell people the way you want them to be as if they already are. Okay, so there's this guy, this couple was married for 3 years. And when they first got married, it was, till death do we part. And it was love and all of that. And then somehow 6 months later, somebody pulled this guy's pin at work and he drove all the way home, working himself into a frenzy, and walked in the front door and unloaded on his wife. Nobody cares. I don't know why I bother. I work and I sleep like a whirling dervish. And she's like, where'd that come from? And she didn't know what to do about it. So she stood there silently and witnessed it. And the problem is that if you let people behave badly in front of you and don't respond, they learn to behave badly in front of you. So what happens? 3 weeks later, he does it again. 2 weeks later, he does it again. Pretty soon, every night he walks in the front door and unloads on his wife. in the beginning of the 3rd year of their marriage, she wakes up one morning ready to give new meaning to "till death do we part." She goes, wait a minute, that's not like me. I'm the kind of person that loves the people I love. And that night when her husband walked in the front door, she used what I call the tactful interruption, which is where you say somebody's name or gender over and over and over again until they say what. So she goes, Tom, 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 Tom. And he's like, and he goes, what? And she goes, that's not like you. You're the kind of husband that knows when you walk through the store, you're with a person that loves you more than anyone in the world. And that's how you treat me. And Tom, seeing himself as embarrassed, and he jumps into the car and peels out of the driveway 90 miles an hour, comes home 2 hours later when everybody's asleep and sneaks into the house and hopes everybody forgets that he lost it. The next night he walks in the front door, starts losing it again. She goes, Tom, 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 until he goes, what? She goes, that's not like you. You're the kind of husband who knows when you walk through the store, you're the person that loves you more than anybody in the world. And that's how you treat me. Oh, and it's out in the driveway in 90 miles an hour.
Couple of doses.
She said it took 3 weeks to change a 3-year-old behavior. And by the way, we were talking about a 3-year-old's behavior with Tom. But anyway, because the first day of the 4th week, he walks in the house with his hand in front of him like this. He goes, I know.
Wow.
That's called
But these are the things that we need to understand about human nature, the psychology. Like, I mean, I wonder if it's good just to keep it amongst ourselves, because if we publish these things, then it will be used against if by following this pattern.
It's all out there. It's in my book, Dealing with People You Can't Stand. All these kind of tactics are out there.
I'm going to put your books out on the NDs for Truth. I'd like you to send me those, like your books and where they can get them, and I'll put a link to your movie. I'd like that. Why not? Yeah, so you'll sell 2,010 books, 2 billion and 10 books. But I wanted to just add something about what this kind of education does. So it creates somebody who's confused and is not ready to practice, and so they lack confidence. And so some go and they become bureaucrats, but a lot don't do anything with naturopathic medicine.
That's right.
Some do. The ones who think for themselves will grind at it, and they'll learn. They'll try to find. They'll find the way so that they could be healing people, because they have that innate ability to explore reality and not just self-deceive, right? But then there's the people. I think this might be the majority of the naturopathic doctors in the last little while that graduate. They don't have the knowledge. When they go into practice, they do the easy approach, which is you look up a condition and you find a solution, right?
Yeah. And you also do all the things that you think are going to be a good moneymaker. So you find that one moneymaker and you build a practice around it, or you give childhood vaccines and well child visits, or whatever it is, because you don't know how to be a naturopath. So you emulate the dominant system, but do it in a kinder and gentler way, which is what I call weak tea. Yeah. And the truth is, if I want to see a medical doctor who's got those kind of resources, functional medicine, integrative medicine, they own that space. We are naturopaths. We own that space. To the degree we can deliver that service, it's needed. It's wanted. People used to line up at my speeches as soon as I said what I was. They wanted that kind of medicine.
Absolutely. I 100% agree. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. I can't believe, there's still a part of me that can't believe we're having this talk, that this is the reality of the situation. It hits me hard sometimes that things wound up this way. It's almost like when the whole pandemic hit, and I'd always been into conspiracy theories. By the way, that was also like when you had mentioned the term anti-vaxxers was a label to demonize people that weren't toeing in line, and also to delegitimize the vaccine injured. The term what do you call it, conspiracy theorist, was developed to stop people from looking into the assassination against JFK. And it's kind of stuck anyway. So I I forget where I was going with that. What was the beginning of my thought? Do you remember what it was?
It's probably similar to my own. I have somewhere I've got to be here pretty quick.
Oh yeah, okay, so we got to wrap up then.
Yeah, we got to
Okay, good. So maybe that was meant to be, that I forgot where I was going with that, with the conspiracy theory.
You
In
were
any
basically
case,
saying how shocked you are that we wound up here.
oh yeah, that's right. And in the beginning of the pandemic, I was really looking, I really got to see how deeply embedded the control schemes are through all of our systems, economic, political, education, religious, you name it. It's just that control has been very, very deep. And there's a part of me that the naive, innocent, believes in the good of humanity part that just can't, it's hard for that part to accept the nature of reality right now and what's manifesting on the planet. Now, I do believe that when this manifests so strongly, the dark, that the light follows it. So we're seeing beautiful things emerging as a result of this dark. And I do also believe that, as I said with Project Looking Glass, that we're coming to a singularity. Now, I don't know whether it's that big hurrah push for humanity to know God in everybody's heart in their beautiful way, or it's just mass awakening and never again will we let people in government tell us what to do, and kind of some kind of grassroots movement that is some kind of Garden of Eden thing. I don't know what it is going to be, but I think it's going to be good. And I don't know how long the winter will last. So I agree with you that you can see the winter. Even though the pandemic has so obviously blown over any real threat, if there ever was anything, it's so obviously over. You know, like look what Trudeau's doing in Canada. They're arresting people for protesting their emergency act and stuff like that. So anyway, in keeping with naturopathic doctors for truth tradition, and I know you got to go, but I'd like to offer you a chance to any last moments of wisdom that you'd like to drop, something you haven't shared. Just please feel free, Doc.
Well, so I was shocked too. I had a hard time believing that people I had known, my whole peer group from when I went through school, pretty much my whole peer group rolled up for this. All my friends, my lifetime friends, stopped talking to me because I was outspoken on medical freedom, even though in my point of view, every naturopath should care about medical freedom. That's our right to be naturopaths, but whatever. I was shocked that they just decided to trust the corrupt CDC, FDA, and public health system, which has been completely bought and purchased by a few individuals with an unbelievable amount of wealth and converted to profit. But I couldn't believe they couldn't see through that. I made my movie to alert people to it. I taught persuasion to alert people to it. I did all of this work to alert people to what's possible in a negative way as well as a positive way, and yet it still happened. So that's where kindness, forgiveness, love, and acceptance is the best way forward, because I don't care to burden myself with misery. I don't care to live my life in a place of hatred and darkness and fear. So I choose love, I choose kindness, I choose tolerance and acceptance. And whatever they got to do to move through it, I will support that. And maybe they never will get through it. I don't know. I can't control that. There's the things I can control, and they're all internal. There's things I can't control. They're all out there in the world.
Right.
But I will say this, I do have faith in humanity. I do believe that most people, the sheep and the sheepdogs, are good people. Most people are good people doing the best they can with what they're able to figure out. And I do believe in people, and it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when people are going to snap out of this thing and realize they got played, because they got played big time. And as soon as they snap out of it, they will be stunned at how much they got played. They'll be like,
and probably angry.
How I become so hateful and unforgiving and how did that happen to me? So I do think that moment's coming. I'll call that this next springtime. And in the meantime, I'm prepared for winter. I am building my network of support the way the world is, not the way the world isn't. I am maintaining my own health and well-being to the best of my ability because I want to have a good life. And I'm being available to anybody that wants to communicate. So let me just say, if you believe in medical freedom, I have a private Telegram group where I'm doing my best to track in real time as much signal and as little noise as possible about what's happening in our world today. And you just have to send me an email, rick@talknatural.com, and I'll send you, tell me you're into medical freedom, and I'll send you an invite to my group. I have my movie. I encourage people to watch it. I think it's really important to know our story, how we got here, where we came from. And the last thing I would say is that be kind. I don't know how long some of these people are going to be with us.
Right.
I think the people that rolled up for this got some problems on their horizon. And I say,
What I've been hearing too.
Yeah.
I hope that we can transcend that or minimize that.
I do too. I think our medicine offers humanity the best shot at recovering from this thing. And but more than anything, I think kindness, caring, compassion, empathy, and a little dispassion, so you don't get caught up in somebody else's story.
Right.
I think that's the best way forward, and I'm here for anybody that wants to talk about it.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being on here and sharing your wisdom. I'm getting to know you more and more as time passes, and I'm very impressed. Like, I've shared with you privately, commiserating about the times, and that was always very enriching and very enjoyable. But I didn't realize how multidimensional and how accomplished you were until I had you on here. So I'm super grateful. And I I feel like we could keep talking for hours. Maybe we'll have you on again if the cards are right and the time's right. So God bless Dr. Rick, and thank you. And whatever you got to do, hope it's awesome. So
Thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun. Much love to you and to your family. Keep on keeping on. And as we used to say in Star Trek, live long and prosper.
Live long and prosper. Amen. That's a good note to end on. Take care, everyone. Peace and love. We'll see you on the by and by.